Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here.
Welcome to U.S. Modernist Radio, where we talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. I'm Tom Guild. Nowhere in the world celebrates modernism better than Palm Springs, California. Every February, they have a huge architecture and design festival called Modernism Week, which actually stretches over 11 days. For the last 5 years, U.S. Modernist has been at Modernism Week, and this year was fantastic, the best yet. Over the spring and summer, we're going to bring you interviews from the U.S. Modernist compound, a.k.a. poolside, at the hip Hotel Skylark with nearly all of Modernism Week's keynote speakers, plus our special guests. Today, in the first of 2 shows about architecture documentaries, George Smart talks with filmmakers Jake and Tracey Gorst of Frey Part 2, The Architectural Interpreter, and later he visits with P. David Ebersole and Todd Hughes, directors of the new Pierre Cardin film, House of Cardin. This year was my second time at Modernism Week, and I had a chance to soak up some of the al fresco dining experience in Palm Springs. There's so many great options for food. Some of them are kind of fancy, like 849 and Lulu's and a few others, but sometimes we just picked where we were going to eat based on gut. Like the tiny French sandwich shop downtown or that Mexican place up from the Skylark. And in every place we had a chance to people watch. And it was just really a lot of fun just to do that.
Yes, Tom, it was just perfect, particularly the weather this year, which was just spot on wonderful.
That always helps.
About 75 during the day, maybe 63 at night. I mean, you couldn't ask for better weather, particularly in February. If you're into mid-century modern, Modernism Week is the Callaway of golf clubs, the Gulfstream of jets, the Ferrari of all the architecture we love, wrapped up into these warm, sunny days and cool, classy nights. When modern-day Jedi Knights use the Force, they don't use it to go to Tatooine. They land inside Bob Hope's massive John Lautner house in Palm Springs.
Which looks like a flying saucer.
It does, and it's enormous, too. Modernism Week is a joyous, all-you-can-view festival of mid-century architecture, lectures, martinis, art galleries, shopping, nonprofit benefit events, architecture documentary premieres like we'll be talking about today, amazing parties at incredible houses, brilliantly curated house tours, detailed art and architecture exhibits, and much more. For me, one of the highlights always is landing at the Palm Springs airport. Or if you're coming from L.A., driving in on 111 off of Interstate 10. Once you land on that runway or you make that turn onto 111, it's really like you're in another world, a gorgeous world of all these things I've been talking about. It's a complete state change. Even the air smells different. I just can't get over it. If you want to go with us in February 2021 and stay at the U.S. Modernist compound, complete with our own swanky pool, and the best granola, crispy bacon, and frittatas in town, email me at george@usmodernist.org. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by Nichiha.com/US Modernist and by Modernist realtor Angela Roll.
In our ongoing mythology, Modernist realtor Angela Roll dated Harry Potter at age 17 as she attended Le Corbusier High School. That's just down the road from Hogwarts. They never played each other in soccer, but their proms were legendary,
yes.
Particularly the year they did Stairway to Heaven. Although ridiculed by architecture students for dating a magician, she learned how to conjure up the slightly tipsy ghost of Mies van der Rohe and aced all the exams, which means she became valedictorian. Now, she's one of the few real estate agents with formal architecture training, giving practical advice to buyers and sellers. Plus, she knows what wizards like to eat. Angela Roll is your magic spell for modernism. Reach her at angelaroll.com, that's ROEHL, or call her at 919-995-0550.
Thank you, Tom. I'm George Smart. There are about 120,000 architects in the U.S. There are roughly about 5,000 architectural historians. These smart, mild-mannered researchers and writers work largely behind the scenes in museums, universities, and cultural institutions. Day to day, they document buildings and architects and extract meaningful insights into the impact of buildings on community, technology, and the quality of life. Within that group, however, way smaller, there are only about maybe 50 of some of my very favorite people, architecture documentary filmmakers. They're passionate, dedicated, overworked, awfully, woefully underfunded projects, produce visually brilliant films that bring buildings to life, and share architecture in a way unmatched by print. These filmmakers comb libraries and visit architects' spouses, children, even their second cousins, to find original video and images. Then they create compelling stories and new original interviews, photos, and videography. As you might expect, the audience for design documentaries is not exactly Star Wars sized. It's a small niche, one deserving of way more financial support, because these films preserve architecture and expose many more people outside the profession to our great modernist legacy. First up, filmmakers Jake and Tracey Gorst, creators of Frey Part 2, The Architectural Interpreter, which debuted in Palm Springs last February during Modernism Week. Born in Zurich, Switzerland, Albert Frey was the first American to work for Le Corbusier, designing the Villa Savoy project, among others. In 1928, Frey came to the U.S. Le Corbusier helped him get a job with the American architect Lawrence Coker, also the managing editor of Architectural Record. At the end of World War II, Palm Springs' population almost tripled, and the city experienced a building boom as an escape for Hollywood and East Coast industrialists. Frey became synonymous with desert modernism. Palm Springs became a resort, and Frey was well positioned to capitalize on this growth. Significant buildings during this period include the Palm Springs Aerial Tramway Station, Palm Springs City Hall, the Tramway Gas Station, which is now a visitor center, and Frey's own homes 1 and 2. Next, I visit with directors P. David Ebersole and Todd Hughes of the new film House of Cardin about designer Pierre Cardin. Let's now go to Palm Springs, where the women are strong, the men are good-looking, and all the houses are above average.
So before we get into the new film, I want to talk about the old film, which I love, Frey 1. What amused me to no end is those stills and movies that you had of Frey on the ship, posing as if he had a film crew standing by while he's in his sailor suit and all this. I mean, how did that come about? Did he have, like, people?
It would seem that way, right?
Yeah.
No, he seemed to be very good with staging everything. So,
Yeah.
Nearest we could figure out is that he just grabbed people. He set up the shot and then asked people to hold the camera and push the button.
Mrs. Tiddlington, would you take this for me?
Yeah.
Because this was what year that he was crossing the Atlantic, roughly?
That was 1928.
Just before the Depression. Yeah.
Forgive me, George, it's been...
It's early.
I'll tell you after I watch the movie again this afternoon.
We won't hold you to an exact date, Jake.
Yeah, so, he had just come back from Zurich. He had been in France, and he went back and stayed with his parents again for a couple of months before he came to the States. And he knew that he was on a quest. He was bringing something special to the United States, and he was going to document everything.
It was just so impressive. It was like we were watching a documentary of him at the time, coming to America.
Yeah.
It's like he knew.
Yeah.
There'll be a movie about this.
Yeah. They're going to need this footage one day, right?
I got to look good.
It's true, and he did that all his life. He documented everything. And, I think to a certain degree, I think it was for his own enjoyment. He probably had friends over. He would show them his pictures. He would show them his movies. But, he was always observing everything around him and just soaking it all in. And it would come out in his work.
Now, let's get into the new movie.
Okay.
This picks up about what year?
This starts in 1939, so it's with his final journey across the country when he finally decided to settle in Palm Springs for good.
Okay.
Yeah. So he had been back and forth a few times.
Mm-hmm.
He was in Palm Springs in 1934, 1935. He was working with John Porter Clark. But he was asked to come back to New York to work on the Museum of Modern Art.
Uh-huh.
Then finally, John Porter Clark basically shamed him into coming back. You know, we have a partnership, and I have my license now, so we don't have to have anybody sign our drawings anymore, and just come and we'll get to work. And that's what he did.
When he came here, was there a big demand already for modernist work, or did he help create that?
I believe he was really one of the beginning forces of modernism in this area. And he had to quickly adapt even what he was doing at first because of the weather conditions here.
Yeah.
And so the way he had to handle the sun and learn to get shade. And so you watch his work evolve from the first things that he did when he came, like the Coker-Sampson building and the first few houses, residences that he did. And then you see him taking it into account and then later on just celebrating the sun and incorporating that into his work.
So he came into this area, which was, of course, very different from France, very different from New York, Chicago, and adapted to it really quite well.
Yeah.
And got this following. And as you highlight in the first film, he was one of the only Americans who had worked for Le Corbusier in France. So that was a special thing right from the get-go.
Yeah. So
It was like having the Heisman Trophy winner on your Little League team to mix sports together.
It's true, you know. I mean, he was, well, we called him an envoy of European modernism to the United States. When he came here, and what he was doing was really different than what anybody else was doing around here. And it definitely left its mark. I was just at the Coker-Sampson building yesterday, again, and kind of bemoaning the condition of it. You know, I'm happy that it's still there. You know, I mean, I've been in the store underneath, and really the only thing that's recognizable is that spiral staircase that's still there in that same spot. All the other buildings have encroached upon it. There's beams that are now, you know, just fastened to it, and from the neighboring structure, and yet Robert Imber, you know, we were speaking with him about it, and he basically said, yeah, just a couple weekends of some light demolition work, and the original building is there.
It's hidden underneath.
It's hidden. It's been protected all this time. It's just hidden.
Yeah.
That's the case with a lot of modernist buildings, isn't it?
Absolutely. People will add to, they'll cover over. That was a thing that generation did, isn't it? Mid-century generation, they covered stuff.
Well, if they didn't tear it down.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the sad part of it, is so much of the work has been lost because the appreciation for it just wasn't there. And now in hindsight, we're like, oh my goodness, they knocked that down. So
I remember in the 70s, it was paneling and shag carpet was
yeah.
just, you know, the uniform
yeah.
tool for everything.
Yeah. But the beautiful thing about paneling is that you can put it over stuff. So you take it down, and guess what's still there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And shag carpeting covered a lot of beautiful terrazzo, which has been recovered.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
I'm glad to say.
Yeah.
I have a question for both of you. So you've produced any number of architecture documentaries now, which is great. I mean, you guys are just you're the Disney of architecture documentaries. I'm assuming there'll be a musical. I'm waiting for that the two of you put out.
Oh, that's a thought.
boy.
You have promised no singing.
Not today.
Okay.
But how did you decide to have this architect be a two-parter versus the other architects that you've worked on?
Well, do you want me to take this?
As the director, I think you should.
Okay. Well, it was about 5 years ago. We knew that we were going to take on Albert. It just seemed to be the most logical. You know, Kirk Brown from Design on Screen.
Right.
Him and his wife, Jill. They originally wanted to do a film on every Palm Springs architect. So we started, of course, with Don Wexler and William Kreisel and Stu Williams, and they were still with us at the time that
You were filming.
we
right.
were filming.
Yeah.
So we were able to interview them, and we figured, okay, well, we'll take on the other ones after this. So Kirk had wanted to do Albert Frey, and he wanted to do Bill Cody, and Bill Cody was already being done by another filmmaker. So it seemed like the most logical thing to do. I knew early on that it was going to be a big project, and when we first started doing our research, I just said, yeah, there's no way we can cover this in just one feature-length film. I mean, his career was way too big. His experiences were too amazing. And then, of course, as we continued in the research and we stumbled on these archives of material that nobody had ever seen before, we realized that we had to showcase them. And I remember calling Kirk and saying, guess what? I think we have 2 films here. We're going to have to split this into 2 parts. And he said, okay. So here we are, part 2.
Is there going to be a third, like Frey, Revenge of the McMansions?
Well, I'm not at liberty to say. Just
Yeah, you signed a document. You
It's a non-disclosure.
Well, let me just say this. There's so much material that we've uncovered that it won't all fit into the 2 pieces that we've done. So we're not doing another documentary like what we have done, you know.
It's the musical. I know there's a musical coming.
You didn't know it, but Albert was a secret recording
Recording artist.
yeah.
There you go, song and dance.
Well, I
man.
know he did naked yoga up on his house, right? That he was famous for that.
I don't know about the naked
Well,
part.
he did, actually.
Oh,
Yeah.
wonderful. I didn't need to know that.
Now you know.
There you go, burned into my brain.
Yeah,
But that didn't happen until like the last decade of his life, after meeting Jean Farrar, that he learned to
Right.
stand on his head and started practicing yoga fairly regularly, which I think helped to prolong his life, actually. He got in much better health at that point.
Yeah, well, she helped him with nutrition and
Okay.
you know, because at the time that they met, he was probably he wasn't in good shape, and she recognized the fact that he had some serious nutrition issues and took him on as a project, you know, more or less, and then they wound up becoming companions. And
Is she still with us?
now, she passed away about 2 years ago, but we did get to interview her before.
Okay, good.
Yeah, she's she tells some interesting stories in the film towards the end of Frey 2. So,
Well, I hope when I'm 80, someone takes me and gives me great nutrition and yoga, and I'm living up on the side of a mountain, you know, upside down, naked by the pool. That would be the ideal way to go.
Everybody has a dream.
thankfully, there's no pictures of this.
Didn't make the cut.
It's a very limited audience.
Yes.
Yeah,
And I think eventually, we were just talking about this on the way over, we're calling this the director's cut. Mm-hmm. This version of the film is, I think, especially for Palm Springs.
Okay.
They hold such an affinity for Albert. And there were things about Albert, just Albert the man, his compassion for humanity, that are expressed in certain experiences that are told by different ones. Certain things that probably will be cut down.
we're going to have a general release version that will actually premiere at an architecture and design film festival, I think in
Washington, D.C.
Is that Kyle Bergman's?
Yes,
Okay.
Kyle Bergman's,
Right.
which will be a little shorter. We're
Okay.
going to trim a couple of scenes that are more Palm Springs centric
Right.
out of it. They'll probably end up being bonus material in a disc release package or on Amazon Prime or something of that nature. So they won't be lost. People will still get to see them, but they won't be part of the main general release version of Part 2.
Now, similar to my experience this last 13 years, you too have become an accidental archivist throughout this journey. Not just with all the Frey stuff, but with one particular grandfather.
One particular one, yeah.
And now I understand that you're in the process of being the archivist and documenting this stuff and scanning it. And what's all that like for you?
It's a labor of love. You know, my grandfather, Andrew Geller, he was another one who documented everything. I mean, he never threw anything out.
That was that whole generation, really.
Yeah, yeah. And so there were negatives and slides that hadn't seen the light of day for decades. And when we started going through all of that, we cleaned up his office, and he had things hidden in places that I didn't even know existed in the house. It was like a treasure hunt. So even more recently, within the last 6 months or so, we have discovered more photographic materials of houses that he did, construction pictures, photographs that he took when he was working in the offices of Raymond Loewy, things that have never seen the light of day. Maybe he showed them to some friends or family when he did his little slide presentations
in the living room.
In the living room at the house, you know. So we continue to find these things and to scan them, and yeah, you never know where it's going to come out.
No, and there's just so much of it, isn't there?
Yeah. I've never actually counted the number of images. I mean, we haven't even begun. We have many trays of slides that we haven't even viewed yet.
Those old Kodak carousel trays?
Yeah.
The circular ones?
The circular
exactly.
ones.
What was that sound that they used to make? There was a particular sound that you could make.
I don't know if I could imitate it, but...
Oh, come on. Yeah, let's give it a try. It's like... doo-choo, chaka-boo-choo, chaka-boo-choo, something.
Yeah, that's very good.
Yeah?
You should record that.
I
You
should.
could beatbox to that. You know?
I could record my slide projector doing that for
Yes.
you and send you a beat.
Please
and
do.
you could actually compose something.
He's
around it.
determined to make this a musical.
Yeah. Because it's one of those forgotten sounds.
Yeah.
It's an
Yes.
obsolete sound now.
It's true.
We'll get our daughters on it. They'll turn it into something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and they're going to hate that I just said that.
Oh, gee. Oh, Dad.
Oh, yeah. Because I remember when I was young and you had the projector, it had a forward button and a reverse button and a select button, which you used to get the slides out when they jammed.
Yeah.
Yes.
And if you press those buttons in various combinations, you can make the projector do a little disco kind of movement and make all kinds of crazy sounds, which would annoy the parents that just paid $500 for this machine.
That's true.
In 1970.
Yeah. And occasionally the slide would jam. You know? And it would maybe bend them or whatever, and that was always a problem.
So what's next on the agenda for the two of you? What's the next project coming down the pike that you can tell us about?
Well, the next project is a project that we're doing through Mainspring Narrative, which is our non-for-profit, and it's a huge project, and it's going to take us probably the next several years to complete, because we're doing it in chapters.
Okay.
So it's focused on New England modernism. First two chapters or episodes, I guess you would call it.
Yeah. We start with the early introduction.
Right.
Yeah.
And then focus on the Harvard Five. Now, that's a subject that's being covered right now by another filmmaker, so this is going to be more of a third person.
Yeah, it's more of a review. It's not going to be the same type of film.
Yeah.
So, and there's plenty of the Harvard Five to go around. So,
Absolutely.
So that's going to be part of chapters 2 and 3. And then we have the housing episode.
Right.
Right? And
Right.
cities.
And cities, which will cover a lot of the civic, churches, schools.
Universities.
We're living in Connecticut, and we're not aware that there were several Breuer buildings within like a 2-mile radius of our house.
Really?
Yeah.
So we thought, I think we've stumbled on something here.
Yeah.
This is extremely convenient.
Yeah, we didn't realize we lived so close to them, and what a nice surprise that. The beautiful thing about those houses is that they were built in very private
Settings.
wooded
settings mostly.
private settings, So what a pleasure to find out that we're on the same road as many of them, and the community is really starting to appreciate and understand what they have there now. I mean, Litchfield County actually just had an event that was centered around the touring, not of just the houses that are in Litchfield proper, but in the county itself. There are many others spread around. And so they're starting to recognize the fact, as Palm Springs did, that this is a cultural asset and that it will actually bring tourists and people
revenue.
Revenue, yeah.
They're not just weird houses. They're an economic development driver.
That's right.
Absolutely.
That's
Yeah.
right. So what a privilege to be there to document that. But our film isn't just about Connecticut, you know. I mean, it's about all of New England. So this past summer, we had started the production on it, as you know, and
I know nothing. I signed a document.
you signed it.
He's good.
You're actually wearing the same jacket that you're wearing now, and I know that jacket very well. I got to spend a lot of time traveling all over New England with my friend Karsten Harris, who is an incredible cinematographer, drone operator. He worked on the Frey project as well.
Yeah.
And boy, we had a lot of fun. And it is to be continued this spring and summer.
So we're in the fundraising aspect of that right now because it is such a large project. We're continuing to raise funds for it. I think the overall budget number was just over $1 million, and
Okay.
we've managed to raise about a quarter of that. But in order to really give the subject matter the attention and the quality that it deserves, we're looking to raise that amount of money to be able
Well,
to
I
complete
noticed
it.
that you didn't land here in your helicopter or pull up in your Ferrari. This is something that you're also having to.
Well, Tracey said that our business is a nonprofit, and that's the key word right there.
Yeah.
It's not about making money. I'm happy when we're able to buy groceries. You know? I mean, that's the way it is. We are documentarians. We are researchers. We're filmmakers. It's an unusual combination. You know, you don't normally have the researchers and the historians actually behind the camera as well.
Right.
You know.
Right.
We wear all the hats.
Yes.
So the reason we set it up like this was because it makes it easier for people to be able to contribute, to be able to be a part of it. They get a benefit out of it as well. They get a tax deduction for their contributions. That's a wonderful thing, and they have the satisfaction of knowing that they're helping to preserve this history.
It's so important. So how do people donate to you?
Well, there are...
Where do they dial into? Is there an 800 number they can call? I mean, come on now.
Okay, all right, here's the plug. Our website is mainspringnarrative.org. There are several different ways that a person can make a contribution. They can write out a check. They can make a donor-advised fund, which is a very convenient way of doing it. And we have an account with the PayPal Giving Fund, so there is actually a Mainspring Narrative page on PayPal's website where somebody can go and easily make a donation using a credit card.
Yeah.
So there are many different ways.
We should probably mention, too, that there's a match in place right now.
Yeah, we have been offered a matching fund of $38,000.
Okay.
So any money that we raise right now up to that point will be doubled.
Great.
And we're very grateful for that.
So how far along are you in your doubling?
Well, the $38,000 is part of what was originally a $50,000.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So we're $12,000 into it.
Okay. So we need to take them all the way, folks. We
There
need
you
to get
go.
them all the way to the end.
That's right.
This is like a telethon. Get
That's
on your
right.
computer.
And that money will enable us to be able to continue our production into the spring. We have a lot of filming to do in the Massachusetts and the Boston area. We're going to be spending a lot of time at UMass Amherst
Oh,
this
beautiful.
coming spring.
Beautiful.
And those buildings are incredible. And many interviews over this coming year.
Well, Jake and Tracey, thanks so much for stopping by and telling us about the film that'll be premiering here this week.
Well, thank you for having us.
Thanks so much, George.
The
Those are filmmakers Jake and Tracey Gorst chatting with George at Mod Week. But wait, George has more filmmakers to schmooze with, B. David Ebersole and David Hughes. And now, a moment of reflection from Nietzsche.
Durability, designed to last for years to come, bringing you peace and tranquility. You feel relaxed, knowing your house can easily achieve any exterior look and any color. Wood, concrete. Your house loves feeling this good, and you love feeling this good. Nietzsche, Nietzsche. Nietzsche, Nietzsche. Say it with me. Nietzsche. Advanced engineering. Nietzsche, Nietzsche. Durability, textures, finishes, and colors. Visit Nietzsche.com/US Modernist. Nietzsche, Nietzsche. Nietzsche. That's N. C H I H. Wait for it. A look you'll love. Nietzsche.
And now, George visits with the creators of a new documentary on the astonishing and still going career of designer Pierre Cardin, P. David Ebersole, and David Hughes.
So I understand that your deep dive into Cardin started with a coffee table. Is that right?
That is true.
Absolutely correct.
We moved to Palm Springs and bought this beautiful Kreisel house built in 1969. And so we really felt like we wanted to kind of push it more Halston Gucci Fiorucci spaceship than that sort of design within reach perfection of, Noguchi coffee table and Sarin
Nelson
tulip.
bench.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So we were
The
looking,
usuals,
The
right?
usuals, which we were
love. They're
fully
beautiful.
planning on
They're
getting.
beautiful, but
Yeah.
so we started looking for something that was a little bit more outside of the box, and I had designed a silver circular sofa for the middle of the living room, and a friend of mine was saying, "Oh, you need a circular coffee table." And so I started searching around for a circular coffee table that was big enough and looked cool, and I found this beautiful Pierre Cardin design coffee table. But apparently it was mythic. They said that it didn't
We
exist.
took it into Modern Way, the picture, to Courtney Newman, who said, "Oh, everyone knows this table. We've all seen it in pictures. No one has seen a real specimen."
Now, is this the one that had the brass inlay on the top?
No, it's different. It's like, it almost looks like, would you say,
4 orange peels.
slices? Yeah.
Slices.
So it's like pieces
And
of
they
pie
move
that come
out
apart
from the
from each
center.
other.
Okay.
It's very pretty,
And it
it's
lights
all
up
white.
in the middle.
It's all white, and it lights up in the middle, and it's on sort of an orb. It sits on an orb, and so I posted on Facebook just saying, "This is my dream coffee table. Apparently, it's impossible to find." And a friend of ours had writer's block and was searching
In Oklahoma.
down the internet and found it in a store in the UK, and it was very expensive. And I just said, "It's a sign," and I bought it.
Boom.
And then the shipping was even more expensive than the damn coffee table.
And we went down to Customs one lonely day. I think it was the day before Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And they were like, "What is in this Cardin table?" Like, I don't know, diamonds and cocaine. It's the Pierre Cardin table. Why is it so expensive?
Yeah.
Did it have to go through a special customs
Had to go
get
through
here?
customs, and we didn't really understand how customs worked at all, but I guess you go down there and you go through a process, and then you go to another area where you have to like kind of get your item out of jail.
Ah, yeah.
And so there was
the cage.
there was a woman who
Yes.
was there, and she looked at our pieces of paper, and everything seemed to be in order. And did we have a van or something, or did we get it delivered to the house?
No. It was released, and then it was part of our delivery.
To get it
was
to go the
delivered,
rest of the
so-
way. Then we had it delivered to Palm Springs.
we had to-
But it had to come through Long Beach, like it had to come through San Pedro.
Wow. Like, were there armed men around it guarding it every
Yes.
step of the way?
That's what it felt like.
It was a very
That's what it felt like.
auspicious beginning to. We had no idea what it would become. But then we got that coffee table. And then our friend Linda Keeler, who's a local artist, came over and said, oh, you know, I have a Cardin credenza you can have that I found on Larchmont. And we said, sure, we'll take it. It was gorgeous, covered in mirror. And then we're like, okay, this guy's for real, Pierre Cardin. Let's find more furniture by him. And that led to discovering all of his beautiful high-end licenses from the 70s for like Sasaki glassware or Pazzi pottery. So we started collecting that. Then we discovered he did a package for an AMC Javelin, a 1972
Muscle
AMC
car.
Javelin.
Beautiful.
Oh, wow.
Insanely beautiful
Which
muscle
my
car.
brilliant husband, who is an expert on the internet, found for sale in Saskatchewan. Next thing we knew, that was ours.
Now, did that have to go through customs as well?
Yes,
you know
it
what it
did.
actually did, which is that we were going from Canada to the United States of America, and those are actually different countries. And so,
They are. What do you know?
The guy said to us, like, well, you're going to have to do something to get it across the border because I guess in Minnesota, there's like a place that you drive through. And so we were going to go fly there and drive there and get the car from him and fill out all the paperwork. And then I did a bunch of research and found out you can actually hire a truck that would do it from one to the other, and they specialize in such things. And so, you know, it cost, I don't know, $1,500-ish or something like that to get them to do door-to-door delivery inside of a truck. So it arrived on our street in South Palm Springs in a truck with a $2 million Ferrari, I think it was. Or maybe it was a Maserati, I can't remember. Some huge fancy car that was on its way to Rancho. And the guy pulled it out and he said, oh, I like your car way better than that Maserati.
But anyway, so a year after we lived in Palm Springs and had started this collection obsession, we got a fellowship in Leeds in Yorkshire, England. So we were there working and really got into Les Disques Pierre Cardin. He had his own record label.
Okay.
That you can only find in Europe. I mean, it's here, and you can, of course, get things now via eBay or via Discogs. But then the shipping is like, 3 times as much as the record. So we started searching for them when we were over there.
But our visas expired after 6 months, so we had to pop over to France to get a tourist visa. And we went to the Pouce, the flea market, and found one Les Disques Pierre Cardin, and nobody there seemed to know Pierre Cardin had a record label.
I sure didn't.
Right?
Yeah.
But then
I didn't even know he did furniture. I mean, I'm thinking of him as like fragrances and clothing.
And
That's-
men's
I know.
suits, right? A
And
lot of
we
people
knew
think
the
of it as men's
name when we
suits.
started this whole thing because we had the cologne when we were kids. And I remember when my family got into skiing, being down at the Big Five or whatever, and going, Dad, I want those. And he was like, the Pierre Cardin skis? You're just paying more for the name. I was like, no, they're so much prettier.
Then we're like, of course you're paying more for the name. Exactly.
That's the whole point.
We're young homosexuals growing up learning that we want to
Well,
be
between
label
that
queens.
and the phallic cologne bottle, I was recruited. But so we were in Paris that day looking for these records, and we were headed towards actually to the Marais for the beer busts that Sunday afternoon, and came across the Musée Cardin. There's a Pierre Cardin museum. And we're like, hey, what do you know? But it was closed, and there was a store next door called Evolution, where they sell his really avant-garde, one-of-a-kind pieces.
Yeah.
It's more for promotion than everything's
Wild.
extremely
Cool.
expensive.
Yeah.
But we did buy a tie there, this beautiful tie. And the guy working at the store, we were showing him pictures of our house in Palm Springs and our car and the record we just bought. And he said, Monsieur Cardin would love to talk. He loves people who love what he does. And we're like, wait a minute, there is a Pierre Cardin? We had never even
and he's
thought
still
about it.
alive?
Yeah.
Right.
Then we said, how old is he? And he said 95, but he still works every day. And I can't set up a meeting for you. I'm not in that position. But if you show up at his women's store on the Rue Faubourg Saint-Honoré on a Tuesday at 10 o'clock, there's a good chance you'll run into him.
He likes to walk through his store, make sure everything is to his liking. And we're like, wait, he's still working at 95 years
Yeah.
old? And they said, yeah, he signs every check. He oversees everything. Everything has to be to Mr. Cardin's liking. We were in town only for a day at that point. We were finishing up this other movie that
But we were
that
so
were
excited
making.
that we could get a picture with Pierre Cardin because all our friends knew we were obsessed. And we're promosexuals. So we wanted to post a picture on Facebook just to say, look, we met Pierre Cardin. no intention of doing a documentary about him. We never thought he would say yes to us, first of all, or...
So a year later, we came back to Paris, and I made our tickets so that we flew in on a Monday night so that we could get all dressed up, go in on Tuesday morning, and try to meet our hero, Pierre Cardin, to get this picture
and
to
we
impress
were in,
our friends.
We were in Paris with our last documentary, Mansfield 66-67,
Yes.
which was about the last 2 years of Jane Mansfield's life, and we were in a festival called Étrange. So we show up at the store 10 a.m. on a Tuesday, dressed up in our Trina Turk.
And we started just talking to people who were, in the store. So we were talking to the woman who ran the store. She thought that because we were talking about furniture and this showing her things from our house that we wanted to buy furniture. So she took us across the street to the little furniture atelier where every piece was $45,000 to $75,000. And she was like, this one's less expensive. And I think it was like $25,000. And we were trying to explain, no, we're just interested in Mr. Cardin. And we actually tried to bring our friend with us to the store because it's a women's store. And I think that's part of what the problem was. We walked in and we're in a women's store talking about furniture, and she was like, oh, well, I can show you the furniture. And then they took us to another store, the men's store around the corner, and showed us that. And we were meeting the different people at the different places. And then I guess our French is terrible. So she was either misunderstanding or interpolating. But
this is all in our schoolgirl French because they don't speak English either.
She began to think that we were documentary filmmakers talking about doing a documentary on Mr. Cardin. And so she called from upstairs, she called Rodrigo, who is Mr. Cardin's nephew, general manager, and artistic director, down to talk with us. And we spent 30 minutes, 45 minutes talking with him. And that also seemed to be all sort of leaning towards the idea that these two American guys wanted to make a documentary about Mr. Cardin.
Well, Rodrigo, who did speak English, said this would be a very good year to do this with my uncle because he has a book coming out by Assouline in a couple months, and then Sotheby's is doing a retrospective of his furniture, and then there's a fashion show on the Great Wall of China to celebrate his 40 years in China in the fall. And we were just kind of like, oh, wow, yeah, it would be a great year, wouldn't it?
So he says to us, why don't you give me your cell phone number? And then, if my uncle is interested in meeting you and you happen to be nearby, like we're not going to drop everything to come and meet Pierre Cardin. And also it was our first day in Paris. So we're like, well, we're here. And if you call us, we'll come. So we capped off our day. We left. We went back to that furniture store to take some more pictures because they told us not to take pictures when we were inside. But, it's right on the street. There's windows. So we went back to take pictures, and we saw in another window a restaurant called Minimes, Pierre Cardin. So it's the salon de thé of Maxime's, which Pierre Cardin owns. So we thought, let's cap off our day and have lunch at the Pierre Cardin restaurant. We go in, and the first woman that we met, the first shopkeeper, was sitting and having her lunch. And we thought, how strange. So they all come in here and have lunch at Mr. Cardin's restaurant. And then Maurice Gaspard, who is one of his muses and director of Haute Couture, she walks in and she walks out and says hello to us. And then the next thing that happens is that the phone rings. The maitre d' walks over with the phone to our table.
Call for you, sir.
Yes.
It was surreal.
And it was Rodrigo. And we thought that they were going to say, we don't know who you are or what you're doing, but you need to stop stalking us. What are you doing in the restaurant? Everyone's seen you there. And it was Rodrigo saying, I've spoken to my uncle and he'd like to meet you.
Far out.
So they were at the other Minimes, there's two of them, and they were having their lunch. So
Next
we
door
went
to
over.
Maxime's de Paris, the famous turn-of-the-century restaurant, which we kind of figured out he owned. We didn't know that either.
Yeah.
So how does this then connect to the film itself? You premiered last year, right?
So we premiered in Venice
Okay.
In 2019, so September. It's, about not even 6 months ago. So we sat down with Mr. Cardin that day, and we were showing him all the things that are in our house, our car, etc. And he stopped on the car and said, you own this? And we said, yeah. And he said, well, do you drive it? Does it work? And we said, oh, yeah, we drive it all the time. And he looked at me, looked at Todd, looked at the phone, and said, okay, what do you want to do and when do you want to start?
Wow. That was your way in.
It wasn't quite bringing the coffee table over to France, but...
Still,
we
the
did bring
javelin was
photo
the
of
magic.
javelin.
It was.
Yeah.
But all of it, now that it's happening, it's still happening. It's never going to end because we've made an alliance now that's not going to go away. It just seems preordained, like that coffee table just led us down this path that led us right to him. And then as you saw in the film, Jean-Paul Gaultier, Philippe Starck, it was the same thing. He meets us, looked into our eyes and said, let's go. You're hired.
Yeah, yeah.
It's sort of his MO.
We cut it out of the film, but many people talked about his clairvoyance.
I see. Clairvoyant is what?
I mean, I think it suggests being able to see into the future.
A little bit. That's
right?
what I always thought.
Yeah. Is that it has a sort of that you're somehow
Well,
able to read minds, see into the future,
As
etc.
Hanamori said, his real skill is being able to see things instantly.
To visualize them.
Yeah, or just anything. Like, just, this works, this doesn't. You'll do this. You're going to be my model.
Being able to make decisions quickly and assess people very quickly.
Yeah.
And have it all work out.
And have a great track record.
Rodrigo, his nephew, says that when he meets you, he scans you. And we always say, I guess we scanned well.
Yes, I guess you did. Now, I've heard that Pierre Cardin has been called the godfather of modernism. Tell me about that.
Well, you know, his look is really just, he always says he designs for a future that doesn't exist yet. So 50 years ago, 60 years ago, he was designing what so much of us are in love with here, what we all celebrate in Modernism Week. It's the space age design, the sort of sleek mod kind of feeling and look. And he was one of the first. He's a pioneer in it.
So what were some of the things that he was doing at that time? Was this the furniture? Because it seemed like he was a little more avant-garde than the kind of furniture I see that's popular here today.
The furniture came in the 70s. So
Okay.
it was like 70 to 80s is when he did the furniture. He still does furniture.
It never
but
stopped.
that was
but the Sotheby's show was 1970 to 1980.
Okay.
And that was really the heyday.
of what he did, but it's mostly that kind of, especially women, but men too. The space age design of clothing, I would say, is what he's known for as being sort of so influential in modernism. But it's also all the products. I mean, it's all the different kinds of desktop items.
Was he the guy behind the moon boot? Those little silver moon boots that were popular for a while?
No.
No. Okay.
He does make
That
them.
might be Andre Courage,
Yeah.
who was a very close friend of his, as was Paco Rabanne.
Yeah. And Mary Quant. It was all happening kind of at the same time. It's not like Pierre Cardin is the only person who came up with the
Right.
with sort of the response to culture is what I think it
But
really
he,
was.
as you see in the movie too, even back then was saying, my clothes are a response to the going to the moon and thinking about people tomorrow and how they're going to have to live.
There was such an emphasis at that time, I guess through about the mid-'70s, of optimism on the future
Yes.
that we don't seem to have as much these days.
Well, now it's all dystopian, right? You look at anything futuristic now. You even use the term futuristic, and people immediately think, "Oh, you mean when everything is going to fall apart after the nuclear war, and we're all wandering, trying to fight for gasoline, etc." But that futurism was full of optimism. It was all about expansion, what might happen, what the human brain was capable of, where we might be going.
And actually, we interviewed Jean-Michel Jarre, the electronic music composer and performer, and he spoke to that at length about how Pierre sponsored a lot of his early career, but they would get together and people would brainstorm about how great the future was going to be.
Yeah.
And it was so exciting. And the design was going to be even better, and the clothes were going to be better, and the music was going to be better.
You think about the Jetsons and that whole idea that we're going to be in floating cars and plastic clothes, and the kitchen's going to be able to do everything by itself, and we're
Actually,
getting
in
there in a way.
There's a brilliant...
I mean, we finally got the two-way wrist TVs that we were promised
Right.
in 1962. We've not got the phasers from Star Trek yet,
Yeah.
but we have the communicators,
Well,
right?
yes, we can talk to each other and look at each other on the television phone.
Right?
There's a great show at the Brooklyn Museum, a big museum retrospective. Pierre Cardin, it just ended. But he was the first to put like sort of Tron light-up material in clothes.
Yeah.
And Matthew Yokobowski, who curated it, found from the Jetsons, Judy Jetson puts on a new dress, plugs it in, and it lights up, and she says, "It's a Pierre Marchand."
I remember that. Sure, of course. Judy Jetson was always trying on those kinds of outfits, right?
Right.
I also remember, too, that of that era, Star Trek was telling us that we were going to have all our world's problems solved here on Earth.
Right.
And that we were going to be working on other planets to having, their conflicts.
Is that the premise of Star Trek?
Well, yeah.
That we've got it solved.
The
here, so we're
Federation
going
has
on?
got it all wrapped up here on Earth.
So we're fighting the Klingons and the Romulans and all those space races out there.
And we're integrated.
Yes, we're integrated. We're good with the Vulcans, our next door neighbors practically in space.
Right. Okay. I guess I just always thought of it like the other kind of sci-fi concepts where for some reason you've been forced to leave Earth because it's so bad.
Oh, no.
And so now you're traveling the universe. Sort of, I mean, Star Wars has a little bit of that kind of feeling, right? That's like, so now you're out in the beyond trying to make peace or figure out how to live
Brooklyn
out
Museum,
there.
they also showed the parallels between Pierre's Cosmocore collection and Star Trek, the TV show.
Okay.
Because the fashions are very inspired by what Pierre Cardin was doing just before that show came out.
Now, as a designer, did Pierre Cardin ever make the highest honor, which is to be mentioned on The Simpsons? Do you know?
Oh.
I don't think we'd know that if that had happened. But when Back to the Future was released in France in 1986, nobody knew who Calvin Klein was. So the French version of Back to the Future is, they say, "Oh, so your name is Pierre Cardin. It's in your underwear."
Okay.
Do you remember that scene?
So how can people see the movie?
We're going to be playing a lot of really great festivals in America coming up. I don't think we can reveal them yet because they haven't been announced.
I think they're not yet announced. But we continue film festivals through the summer, and then come August, we're having a theatrical release, and then it will be on streaming as well before the end of the year. So 2020 is really the year that we're going out and about into the public.
So just as a side question, is the DVD dead? Is it all going to streaming now?
We keep thinking every time we make a movie, it will be the last time that we have a DVD. And apparently, no. Apparently, I think it's gone to Blu-ray.
Okay.
Well, we were just in New York, and we had a meeting with Kino Lorber, a company, right? You know that name. Anyway, they have a huge DVD business, but it is really skewing older now. And I predict in 10 years, we won't have any physical media whatsoever.
They'll be all gone. It'll be all atoms.
Yeah.
It's all downloads, and you won't have cassettes, CDs, DVDs.
It'll play on Judy Jetson's double wrist television.
Wirelessly.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for stopping by and talking about the film. I'm sure people will really enjoy it when it comes out, and they can see it on their various devices.
Exactly.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
That was P. David Ebersole and David Hughes, directors of the documentary House of Cardin.
Stay tuned over the spring and summer as we bring you more shows from 2020's Modernism Week in Palm Springs. You want to hang out with us at the swanky U.S. Modernist Compound at Modernism Week in February 2021? Email George at usmodernist.org. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by Nichiha.com/US Modernist and by Angela Roll, your special agent for Modernist Houses, 919-995-0550. All right, George, it's your turn to take us out.
Visit usmodernist.org's massive archives to listen to past shows, discover documentation of 7,000 significant modernist houses, and access 2.8 million pages of classic 20th century architecture magazines. U.S. Modernist Radio is produced by Soundtracks Recording Studio in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song was performed by me, Ann Robinson Earl. Carrie Cesarino researches guests while juggling 2 children, a bowling ball, and a flaming torch, all while blues dancing with husband Adam.
Wow.
U.S. Modernist Radio is a production of Modernist Archive, a nonprofit educational archive for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. I'm George Smart, and there's no Frank Sinatra tune that doesn't play well under the stars with a martini in Palm Springs. We'll be back soon with another Almost Like Being in Love, The Way You Look Tonight, and the Best Is Yet to Come edition of U.S. Modernist Radio. Cheers.
Cheers to you too.